And I realized that while I could do design, it's not what I'm best at. So really the human side and understanding people and the research side gave me a lot of energy, made me very excited, and doing the work seemed easy and, very engaging. And I think that's one of my main career tips to people is that I have seen that it is much better for people to pick something as an area of focus if they have a lot of energy around it, if it gives them that feeling, then just picking something because you think it's the right thing to do.
Since we are talking about the career path of user research, so I'd like to mention that I really like the speech that you just gave in the UX conference about career path. That was really brilliant, and also I personally really resonate to that. Yeah, so
Thanks.
especially when you're talking about the conversation you had with a data scientist and about whether they have ever been questioned about their expertise and whether other people can do their job. And yeah, if you're interested, I can share a personal story about me.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So here's the thing. My partner, he's a data scientist, and sometimes we have this argument at home about about my job, and because he doesn't understand my role and the value that I'm making in my daily work. And now, especially now, like we are working from home, just sitting together in the study and side to side. And sometimes when I was writing my research report and he's looking at my monitor, he's like, "Oh, honey, you are really good at making your presentation slides pretty. It's really nice. And seems like it's a very easy job for you to make a decent salary. You just talk to people and make presentation slides, and then you just get your money." I'm like, I was so pissed off. I was like, dude, you know what? My department, they use my research funding to create their product strategy for their roadmap plan, for this year and also the next year. And my PMs, they even copy and paste my research funding, to their business plan. What kind of change have you made with your machine learning model? And he's like, So, those kind of conversations. But here's the thing. For data scientists, they can prove their value by showing the exact number, that they are bringing to the company, because it's somewhat quantifiable. But how can we, user researchers, prove the impact of our work other than the word of mouth? So,
Well, it's an ongoing challenge, I think, because when we're very engaged with teams, it's a partnership, right? So you and the product team and data science and everyone, you're working together to brainstorm how to solve a problem. And the issue, I think, that comes up is that it becomes very, very unclear where the kind of credit should go to. The way I look at it, though, is that ideally, if you're part of the team, everyone shares the credit, and there shouldn't be any kind of need to point at people, right? It's a partnership across the board. So I don't have a perfect solution for that right now. What I do know is that different teams have tried different kinds of measurement or evaluation success to tie, let's say, a launch or an experiment to qualitative data or to a study or quant data that came from our team, and then be able to make the connection to it. I think the other thing that's hard is that if we do a really good job of identifying the user needs and evaluating and thinking about what's being put out there, it's almost invisible, right? Because it's only when you have a bad user experience that it's really obvious. It's like if you're walking down the street and the sidewalk is clean, you're like walking, you're not paying attention. But if you walk down the street and there's a stick and rocks and there's broken pieces, then you notice. And I think that being really clear about that with your teams. Now, one successful strategy that I've seen used is that I think there's an opportunity to be really, really precise about what the problem is and what questions we don't have answers to at the beginning of a project. Because if you bring them along the way, you get to the end and they're like, well, that was obvious, because they've kind of they've lost track of the fact that they didn't know the thing at the beginning.
Yeah.
So a good former colleague of mine named Michael Margolis has a whole theory he calls starting at the end. So you figure out what you need at the end, and then you go back to the beginning and you detail out what is it exactly that the open questions are. And then when you get to the end, then you can point to it and say, remember when we didn't know XYZ? Well, now we know it, right? And you can build a better path. So that's some of the options.
Yeah. I watched his talk. That was brilliant. I really liked it. Yeah.
Michael's a really, really thoughtful guy. The other thing I would just point out, right, is that while sometimes what we do can be seen as just talking to people, I think we can all agree. Yes, I think we can all agree that humans are incredibly complex. Right? So if you go to the psychology section or the self-help section at the bookstore, it's enormous, right? Like there's so many theories and ways to apply and understand how humans interact, how they interact with each other, with the world around them, with technology. That on the surface it might seem simple. Well, there's algorithms for taking care of data and managing it. There's no algorithms for people. So what we do is very complex, right? And takes a lot of experience and expertise. But it can be a little bit invisible to our colleagues.
Yeah, exactly. And in a very subtle way, and we are making this influence. And also, another question I have is, in the talk you mentioned that we need to define our own path in the next decades. So I'm wondering, in your perspective, let's say in an ideal world, so what will the future look like for user research?
I think that we need to look to some of the other disciplines like data science and identify how they've been able to carve out a particular area of expertise that's well defined. And so I'd like to see us do that. I'd like to see our teams be more aligned with insights functions and partner up with data science and marketing insights or other kind of experimentation to ensure that we are understanding people as holistically as we can as we build our technology.
Yeah.
And I do think that we really need to start specializing our roles and the definitions of those roles. Like design has, right? So, there was kind of the interaction design role at Google when I started, and now they have visual designers and motion designers, product designers, they have specialists, and they see the value of a real specialist because they've invested in that, right? And I don't think that we've done that investment in research.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, it's very important to break down to a certain granular level. Like data scientists, they have machine learning scientists, insights, and also data engineers. And now they're even trying to narrow down further. So yeah, it's becoming more and more necessary.
Yeah, and I think it helps. There's pros and cons to it, right? There's definitely not any organizational structure or role specialization has benefits and disadvantages, but I think the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages for us as a group.
And in terms of the ideal research team that you would like to build, so what do you look for from a user researcher?
So some of the most important things for me are really good experimental design thinking. So the ability to be thoughtful about how to answer business problems, and do it in a rigorous experimental way. And if given a set of parameters, what's the best study you can come up with given the time, money, types of users, and things like that. A passion for learning, a real interest in learning both about your users and learning new techniques.
Yeah.
I think that collaboration is really important.
Yeah.
And analysis skills, basically the ability to distill a large amount of data down to some very concrete next steps. And I look for, on a team as a whole, a lot of variety. So I think that we all grow and learn from experiencing different backgrounds, different experiences overall, different skill sets, different kinds of things like that, and that it really helps build a team that can be responsive, right? So if someone says, "Oh, does anybody know about XYZ?" Someone can pop up and say, "Oh yeah, I did that in my last role. Here's some tips." But if we hire all the same people with all the same background, we are missing that. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think we have a very diverse background in our team.
Yeah,
so
it's very nice.
Yeah, it's really nice. And also you just mentioned that you're looking for someone who is understanding the business question and kind of break that down to a research design and to answer that question. And you also mentioned they're passionate to learn and analytic skills and collaboration, the communication skills. So those are the things that you would look for from a researcher. Then how do people exhibit those characteristics, in a way that you can assess and measure them? So how do you, look for that from a researcher?
Yeah, I mean, during an interview process, there's different things that might indicate that, and do our best to try and understand that. So, what kinds of projects have you worked on in the past? What was successful or not about those? In my previous role at Uber, we would do an exercise. So we had our researchers do a fairly short research exercise, and then if that reached a certain bar of quality, then we would interview them about that exercise to understand their thinking, right? So to see, what would you do if you were given this exercise? Oh, you would pick this many users and you would do this. Well, tell me about why. So it's not necessarily that there was a wrong reason, but I want to understand how they think about things. And then you can also say, imagine that there's a designer and a junior researcher who can partner with you. How would you work together? What's your expectations for how that would go? What are the kinds of things that you would let them do, and what kinds of things would you keep tasks for yourself? And you can help understand how they work with teams. And then you can also talk to them about what kind of deliverables they would build, and what that might look like. So there's a number of different ways to get at it. Of course, it's not perfect, but you can kind of dig into it a bit.
And we just talked about researchers with somewhat experience. Then how about graduates who have a very little work experience? So let's say when in a company hire a graduate researcher, so what would be the most valued attribute of that person?
Yeah, so at Google, the only place that we've hired graduates was Google. We would hire people who would do either master's or PhD programs. Everywhere else I've been, I tend to hire people with 1 or 2 years of experience. But I mean, I think that people who've done internships is important. People who have experience doing this in the real world. It doesn't have to be a lot, but they need to have some, because the transition from graduate school and academia into industry can be quite intense, right? It's a lot of big changes, right? So, the question is, how to, like, what should they ask me the
Yeah,
question again? Let me make sure that I
sure.
answer it well.
Yeah. So what would be the most valued attribute of a
Ah,
graduate? Yeah.
flexibility. I think that's probably one of the things that's the hardest for new grads is the fact that the business changes quite fast, and they're going to have to be flexible about the plans, who they work with, the kinds of methods they use, and you don't have to be really happy about it. I'm not saying it has to be great, but you have to be prepared for a lot of changes that maybe you weren't ready for before.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Remind me when I just started my career. Yeah. That was definitely a lot of changes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah. And we also know that this year, 2020, is a weird time for people to start their career. So
Mm,
what would be your advice for,
yeah.
graduate or people who are making career transitions to start their job this year?
Yeah. So the year that I graduated from my master's program in 2002
Mm.
was just after the dot-com bubble, the first dot-com bubble, the dot-com bust.
Oh,
So there
yeah.
was a lot of Webvan was, there were all these big things about the internet in California, and it just kind of blew up.
Mm.
And so it was very hard for me to find a job. There were no jobs available. The few that were available were being taken by people with a lot more experience, and things like that. So my main advice to folks is to do what I did basically, which is I just found all the kinds of interesting contract work I could. So
Mm.
I worked for a local web company that did hosting. They needed some help with the website. I helped a friend with something. I helped my dad. I did all kinds of side work. And then eventually I found contract work with a more significant company. So this was a company in Atlanta that did usability consulting. And they had just started out. They were looking for a contractor to help them with design and sometimes research. And I just started working with them. And they saw that I made a positive impact. And then they very quickly offered me a full-time job. And so I know that I mentor people sometimes and they want to go straight for the cool career job first, right? And they want to get that thing that, is on the resume. It takes time, right? It took me 6 years to get to Google, which was a company I'd been following for a while and was really excited to work at. But I had to work at a lot of other jobs first to get there, but then eventually I did. So
Yeah.
it would be just to do a lot of different kinds of work, take some roles and figure out how to make the best of it.
Yeah.
My other main advice, if you get into user experience and research in particular, is in English we have this phrase to not burn bridges, right?
I know that.
So basically, maintain the best relationships you can with the people around you because it's actually a fairly small community, and burning bridges can be quite bad for you in the long term. And also, it's not a good way to work, right, in general. So, do your very best where you can stay, obviously if someone's really difficult, you don't have to stay friendly, but, try and work things out and stay friendly. I was actually just telling someone that, you don't realize quite how small the world is, basically. When I moved to California, we bought a house, and this doesn't seem like a relevant story, but it is.
I love the story.
Moved to California, bought a house, and after 3 years, we decided to sell it. We found some buyers, and they were from China. And I was working with them, and they were very nervous, right, because we were going to do it in a cheaper way to save money, but it didn't seem very official. Anyway, long story. But then we realized that we knew some of the same people in Shanghai who I worked with at Google, and then everything was fine. So like, you just never know how the people you work with will be connected to you in other parts of your life, in other parts of your world. And it's just it's a wonderful thing. And you just need to be very positive and ready for that to happen by not burning bridges.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's amazing. Wow. From Shanghai all the way to California.
Sunnyvale. Yeah.
This world is so small. Yeah.
It is. I mean, I even, when I've had all kinds of strange coincidences like that, made connections, and they're very, they can be really positive. So.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes we also need to be compassionate about people, be understanding about the difference, between maybe cultures or, just understanding, their path. That would be very helpful. Be compassionate about them. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my most important principles is to assume good intent. So that if something goes wrong or there's some kind of problem, my assumption is always that it was a mistake or an accident or they didn't realize it was a problem. You don't know until you talk to that person. You don't know what's happening. But 9 times out of 10, it was not intentional, right? And that's super important, like you said, to just be open and stay positive.
Yeah, that's sweet. Now our conversations get more and more philosophical.
Yeah. It's fairly practical too, though,
Yeah, well, I like it. Yeah, I think we talked a lot about the career path and also the how do you hire researchers, how do you look for from a researcher, and I really enjoyed our conversation so far. I wish I could go on, but time is almost up, so I don't want to take more time from you. But thanks so much for joining me today. It was really lovely.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to anyone reaching out. If anyone sees this and wants to talk, I'm on LinkedIn, so look forward to it.
Oh, awesome. Then I'll make sure I have both a Chinese and English version on it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Molly.
you.
I'll give you some time before your next meeting.
Yes, all meetings all day. All right. See you. Bye.
Cheers.